Now, when the markets collapsed in the summer of 2007, what collapsed was this mortgage-backed securities-related derivatives machine. That's where the system blew up. But it wasn't a subprime crisis. The subprime crisis was the loosening of terms in order to keep the money flowing to feed the derivatives machine. All right, so it blows up. Suddenly, all of the insiders quit playing the game. They want out. They don't want to buy more of these securities. They want out. All right. This leads to the crisis in March of 2008, where Bear Stearns went under and was picked up with a nice little bailout by J.P. Morgan Chase. And then the big collapse, which occurred in September 2008, when the whole system ground to a halt. The whole system was going under, just like Lyndon LaRouche said it was going to.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens?
You're talking about when all the interbank lending stopped and just the whole...
I mean, you had these investment banks which fund themselves by borrowing billions of dollars every day.
Every day.
You know, so they borrow through the money market. They borrow from things like General Electric, but they have this enormous funding that they have to do every night. They have a whole department, each one of them, a whole department designed to raise money every night so that they can open their doors the next day. And all of a sudden, that started drying up. So they were about to start falling. And this is when we had the famous weekend where Lehman Brothers went under. Merrill Lynch was taken over by Bank of America. All right. Well, I suspect, I can't prove it, but I think that Lehman Brothers was actually pushed over the edge by the Inter Alpha Group system, because the whole system was going down. The only way to save it was a government bailout. And the only way to get a government bailout was to create a giant crisis. Something had to be sacrificed. And that something was Lehman Brothers. Now, it was bankrupt, without a doubt. It should have been shut down, without a doubt. But so were they all. So, you know, they, in the manner of a pack of wolves turning on one of their own, you know, they created the conditions for the bailout. And then in short order, within a period of days, all right, Lehman was shut down. Merrill Lynch, which was the next one to go, was taken over by Bank of America. Morgan Stanley got a big injection of money from the Japanese. Goldman Sachs got a big injection of money from Warren Buffett. You know, Wall Street was bailed out. And the government bailout was set up, not just the TARP, but all sorts of other facilities, which kept being expanded throughout this whole period. So you got to the point where the government was the market. That all of these banks are open now because the government is subsidizing them. The stock market is at a high level because it's being effectively subsidized by the government. The mortgage market exists only because it's being subsidized by the government. There is no free market. The government is funding everything, and the government is bankrupt.
Right.
And then Pete Peterson comes in and says, the federal government is bankrupt. It's being a spendthrift. Well, to the extent that we're bailing you out, yeah. You know? But this is all the result of this process of the creation of these financial markets by the Inter Alpha Group, the creation of globalization. So you have this giant setup where this big bubble is created. The most important thing is that the real economy was killed.
Yeah.
All right. We didn't
by
go
design,
by design.
Intention. It wasn't.
We didn't go nuclear. We didn't shift our economy upwards to a higher energy flux density. We instead allowed our infrastructure to deteriorate. We shut down our manufacturing. We moved a lot of it overseas in search of the cheapest labor costs, you know, this race to the bottom. And then we made up for it by building the giant casino. All right. And in a sense, the giant casino was the hook. You get everybody thinking, okay, now we're going to get rich. We're all going to get rich. We're going to get richer than ever before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then it blows up. And then what happens? Then the same system comes in and says, okay, save us, bail us out. All right? That's what destroys, that's the final nail in the coffin of the nation state.
Mm-hmm.
When you start bailing out this pile of fictitious capital, you're letting your real economy collapse in order to bail out all this monopoly money.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's sort of like, you know, you have these giant multiplayer online games, you know, like World of Warcraft and things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where people just, they forget their lives and they start playing all these games. Well, if you think about Wall Street as that sort of thing, only the game is sort of a variation on Monopoly.
Yeah, right.
And all of these traders are sitting around trading with each other and playing this game, and they all go further and further into this this Monopoly game.
Mm-hmm.
And the real economy continues to shut down because nobody's going to work anymore. They're all off at home playing Monopoly. You know, that's in a sense what happened to this country. And now the Monopoly game blows up, and they say, all right, the government's got to bail us out.
No.
Well, no, we don't. What we need to do is return to Glass-Steagall.
Right.
Because what you have to do is you have to stop this game. You have to stop this whole inter-alpha process. You have to go back to an American system economy. You have to go back to the kinds of regulations that FDR put into place. That, you know, they say that this is a modern economy and we can't go back to 1930s regulations. You know, I laugh every time I hear this because modern regulation was what FDR did.
Yeah.
And what all of this deregulation is a return to what existed before that. Mm-hmm. To basically a return to the glory days of the empire when they could do whatever they wanted and no nation could stop them.
Yeah.
And the United States was formed in part to stop them. And we were doing a very good job of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's time we pick that up again.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty amazing when you look at some of these figures of trillions and trillions and quadrillions, really, of dollars worth of nominal debt, and then compare that to the magnitude of credit which, if we were to issue on the federal level to the states, to stabilize the states, that if you look at the difference between those two magnitudes, you can quite quickly see how insane and really silly this whole inter-alpha bubble actually is, and why it's not just it shouldn't really be a big deal to write off all of this funny money because it's obviously completely fantasy, and not only that, but it's destroying the attempt to pay it back. You couldn't do. You could not pay back. We could never. The citizens of the United States, we could not fulfill the bailout in terms of paying it back. Our country would disintegrate long before then. That's what's happening right now. So it seems to me we're at a point of choice right now, which is, I think, one aspect to why people are rising up around the nation now, around the world, around the nation, is the recognition of that fact that if we keep going down this road with a bailout, with President Obama's policies, with some of these wacko Gaddafi duck types like Governor, what we call him last week, Death Walker of Wisconsin, that if we keep going down this road, it's recognized that we're going to that there is no future, that there's no future for the children, there's no future for the adults of this generation, that we're going to collapse.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a debt crisis now. We have a debt that we cannot pay. Before we started the bailout, we had a debt that we couldn't pay.
Mm-hmm.
That was part of what was killing us. And the bailout process is increasing the level of debt in the economy. So you get this idiot Bernanke who talks about how all of his policies are working. And all he's doing, well, there are more crimes than that. I don't want to let him off the hook in any way. But one of the things he's doing is he's creating more and more debt on an economy whose ability to service that debt is collapsing. Mm-hmm. It's insane. It's criminally insane.
That's lethal to the nation.
It's lethal to the nation. I mean, you can't look at the cost of the bailout in money terms alone, because what it is doing is killing the nation and killing civilization. And, you know, that's the problem. This is not a job for accountants. You can't look at it in accounting terms. How much is this going to cost versus how much is that going to cost? You have to look at what's being done to the nation and what's being done to its people and say, this is intolerable, this is not acceptable, and we will not let this continue. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you see with, you know, the outbreak of demonstrations all across the world. That the British Empire is committed to genocide. It's committed to lowering the population of the world by 2/3. And you do that by squeezing people, by having speculation in the price of food. There's not enough food around, and the food there is becoming too expensive.
Too much demand, as they put it.
Yeah,
too many people
demand.
Who are hungry.
Right.
Oh.
And this is an old game. But this is Venice at work. Mm-hmm. And this is what we have to stop. I mean, this is, you look at Enron. You mentioned Enron before. The Enron model of turning electricity into a free market profit center. Mm-hmm. Whereas before you had these utilities, electric utilities, which produced electricity. They had a monopoly in their own market. Now, here's an area, you produce the electricity for this area. You're going to be regulated. Mm-hmm. You can charge enough to get to turn a profit so that you're a sound business, but you can't gouge the population. We won't let you. You accept this regulation in exchange for the monopoly. Mm-hmm. And you will operate accordingly. Now, that model worked. It worked very well.
That's the sort of thing that the states would previously invest in rather than this mm-hmm. casino. Oh.
Yeah. And so then comes the idea of deregulation with Enron as the leading purveyor. Mm-hmm. Enron, of course, learned deregulation in Britain mm-hmm. under Margaret Thatcher and was steered by Lazarus and Rothschild. And they set up a financial middleman between the producers and the consumers with the idea that the financial middleman was to make as much money as possible. Mm-hmm. All right. So you turn electricity into something that's a speculative vehicle. And it's actually modeled on what they did with oil. All right. Now, what does that do to an economy when your electricity costs start going sky high? It destroys your economy. Whereas electricity ought to be cheap and prices stable. You want to encourage people to use it because electricity increases the productive power of human labor. Mm-hmm. So therefore you want to have a lot of it and you want to have it cheap. That's what the economy needs. And when you get heat waves, you want people to be able to turn on their air conditioners so they can stay cool. Mm-hmm. And get some sleep and go to work the next day and do something productive. Yeah. Instead you get these, what we have now is, in giant heat waves, they say, everybody should turn off their air conditioner
to conserve. Yeah.
Well, that's a confession. Uh-huh. But this idea of turning everything into a profit center, like they want to do with, toll roads or parking meters in Chicago. That sort of thing. Privatize government assets and then charge people whatever the market will bear for using those elements of infrastructure. Mm-hmm. This is economically insane. Mm-hmm. And it's criminal because you're taking things that were paid for with public money, that are in the public trust, and you're selling them off to private interest and letting them price gouge. You're betraying the nation when you do that.
I think this is one of the more important aspects of us getting a Glass-Steagall standard through, because it's not, as has been covered on this site, there are many aspects to the Glass-Steagall legislation. I think in this context of what you're bringing up, part of that is not just the separation of the banks and the finances, but the creating of the approach toward credit and toward finances that doesn't even allow that to be that type of method of economy, if you will. This whole privatizing all the basically selling off the general welfare. It creates the conditions to where that's not an option. You don't have the states trying to make ends meet and looking for any kind of quick money or any money at all and say, well, maybe we'll sell off part of our state house or this kind of thing. You won't have that kind of environment in which for the type of operations coming from things like the Inner Alpha Group to actually function.
Mm-hmm. And you look at other aspects of this, like you have this phenomena of allowing corporations to patent life forms, which you see with the
Monsanto.
Monsanto is the best example of this.
Mm-hmm.
There are all these other life sciences companies that are creating life forms and trying to patent them, but Monsanto and what it does with its seeds.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a fascist operation.
Mm-hmm.
Monsanto is closely tied to the British royal family, which should be no surprise given the way it operates. And so they develop seeds, the genetically modified seeds that they patent.
Mm-hmm.
These life forms belong to us. As if they have any right to patent life, that they developed life,
Yeah.
And then in addition to selling these seeds, they have this very aggressive policing operation. Which is if a farmer here buys our seed and uses it, and in the process of planting and harvesting, some of those seeds blow over into the neighbor's field, if we can detect any of our genetic material in the neighbor's field, then the neighbor's guilty of a crime.
Mm-hmm.
And they've had Blackwater go in and do intelligence on opposition groups, farmers who get together to protest this stuff. Mm-hmm. So, this is just a pure fascist operation.
Oh.
And it really needs to be broken up. The idea that you can patent life has to be ended. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, what are you going to have? You're going to have the royal family try to get the patent on air. You have to pay us if you want to breathe.
Yeah, right.
This is all crazy, but this shows you how far this whole process has gone of going to an oligarchic world. Mm-hmm. In which, but it's a return, it's presented as if it's modern, but it's really a return to the old lords and peasants model, where the lords own everything and the peasants are like cattle to be used for labor or maybe meat, and other things like that, but that they fundamentally have no power. And that the population of the peasants is to be strictly controlled. Mm-hmm. And all of this, the Enron model for electricity, the spot market, futures market model for pricing of commodities and things like that, this is all a way of setting into motion a way to make money as you collapse the population of the planet. Mm-hmm. Because you're making money now not from all of these derivatives trades and things like that, which are being phased out largely. The bubble is gone. The financial markets are smaller now, and they're going to continue to get smaller as you collapse everything, as they collapse everything. Hmm. And so the idea is you're going to make smaller amounts of money, but you're going to increase the level at which you gouge the population. Mm-hmm. with the idea of taking the necessities of life and pricing them high enough that there's always people who can't afford them and will get pushed off the edge while you make as much money as possible. You know, so this is the new model. This is what they're doing, and so they're shutting down everything. I mean, what Scott Walker is doing in Wisconsin is just the harbinger of the future. You pick on the labor unions in governments, because that's a good place to start. You know, you break them. The trade unions are largely broken already in the United States. You've destroyed wages in the United States by shipping most of our productive jobs overseas to places where we're competing with wherever they can find the cheapest labor in the world. That's what we're supposed to compete with, and if we want to stay competitive, we have to accept those wages. This is exactly wrong from the standpoint of physical economy, because what you want to do is have an economy in which you increase the level of pay for the average person. You want to increase their standard of living. You want to increase their level of education. You want them to become more and more capable of operating in a modern industrial economy. You want people to be able to think. You want people who are better educated, who have the capability to be creative, who can use that creativity to advance the economy. We're going in exactly the wrong direction, and we're going that way because it is precisely the wrong direction for a modern economy. You know, this is the imperial view of the world writ large, and that's what we have to break. We have to break this game up,
and that breaking that game has to come from here, from the United States. We have set the precedent with Glass-Steagall. The whole idea for the fixed standard of exchange, this was coming off the heels of World War II, where we defeated the British Empire intention at that point in time through Hitler to destroy the United States. We defeated that and then set up the idea being that if you have the capability to have long-term credit, you brought this up earlier with this idea of the exchange rate. If there's instability, you can't rely on the exchange rate. You can't issue credit for 30-year projects among sovereign nations, this kind of thing. These precedents, which at every turn have stymied the British Empire, have come out of the United States first. You mentioned Lincoln after the Civil War with the spread of the rail, which provided a threat to the empire. That came from the United States. After the 7 Years' War, when the British realized that when the British East India Company, when Great Britain became a Venetian empire, it was recognized at that time that territorially it was too much to control through military means, so it had to go monetary. Immediately, we established tariffs, right, and shut them down on that front. At every turn historically, the problems for the British Empire have come out of the United States, and so that's what has to happen right now.
And one of the ways you mentioned tariffs, that the nation made its tax revenue was by taxing business, by taxing trade, by taxing activities, not through an income tax, not through taxing of ordinary citizens' wages, but by tariffs on commerce. Okay, that worked. But if you think about the world company idea, corporatism, in which the corporations, the big cartels, consider themselves they're not above governments, above the level of governments. This idea of what are called multinational, but I think a better word for it is imperial. That they're creatures of the empire, and as creatures of the empire, they're not subject to the laws of mere nations. That's the way we're headed. That's the way these things are viewed. And so you have increasingly the tax burden in the United States has been taken off of these corporations and put onto the ordinary people. The tax laws have been shifted to tax incomes higher than investments, or wages higher than investment income, corporate tax breaks, all sorts of things. So you have this real inequity that's growing in the tax system. You have then the Bush and Obama tax cuts, where they're giving tax breaks to the very wealthiest people, while they're demanding that we shut down everything in the real economy. Right? And the mindset behind that is imperial.
Yeah,
it's evil.
Yeah, because it's the intention behind it. Because one of the reasons that we had erected the tariffs was to foster physical economic growth in the United States then. And so, whatever the particular mechanism may come to look like, whether it be through taxation, whether it be through the separation of the banks, whether it be through establishing a new global fixed exchange rate, these kinds of agreements, all of these mechanisms really flow from the intention of whether or not we're going to fulfill the preamble of the Constitution, and acting from that standpoint as a nation, then interact with other nations with the interests of the citizens, the human beings on the planet in mind first. Then that's where you get these things that you brought up with all the tax breaks and the bailout generally, and all of this comes from the opposite intention of taking down the population, reducing the population morally, mentally, and physically killing people.
Yeah.
That's the point that we're at right now.
Yeah. And the way to stop that is through national sovereignty by using the Constitution, the principles upon which this nation was founded. Yeah. Because we have the power to do it. We have to assert national sovereignty. We have to say to the empire, we're the United States, you're not. You're a parasite empire, and we're going to put you out of business. You no longer operate inside the United States, for starters. You don't like it? So what?
Yeah, shutting down Wall Street wouldn't be it wouldn't be a big loss. It would be a gain.
Sure. If you got a 50-pound tick sitting on top of your head, you remove it.
Yeah.
The tick would disagree. Who cares?
Yeah.
All right. So you go with Glass-Steagall. An assertion of national sovereignty. This is how the banking system is going to work from here on out. No more speculating with deposits. A clear break between commercial banking and investment banking. The investment banks would squawk, but how are we going to make money if we can't steal your deposits? Well, that's the point, guys.
Yep.
Learn to live with it. All right? Then you reorganize the banking system, and you look at what's real and what's not, because we're not backing any of the monopoly money. The monopoly game is going to shut down. So you have a highly regulated commercial banking system, which is not allowed to engage in speculation, period. You have the derivatives market. We end by just declaring all derivatives null and void, and henceforth no derivatives contracts can be undertaken. They're outlawed. That takes care of that. You don't have to worry about paying them off. They never should have existed. They're not real. They're an affront to civilization, and they're a giant scam. It's all criminal activity, so you shut it down. You don't even blink an eye. Just shut it down. Let them scream. All right? You go to a fixed exchange rate again. Say, all right, we're going to have stability in the world. You don't get to play these games with currencies anymore. You don't get to play these games with interest rates anymore. You're out of that business. You can't make any money? Tough. You shouldn't have made it in the first place. No more bricks through the window. All right?
Yeah.
So this changes the nature of the financial markets completely.
Yeah, you take away the monetary empire's ability to operate. You don't just throw people in jail or shut down this aspect or that aspect. You take away their capability to function.
Yes. All through assertion of national sovereignty. Yeah. That we set the rules. Nation states set the rules. The highest form of political organization on the planet is the nation state. Nation states can act together in concert in a harmony of interest to see that certain things are done. Mm-hmm. But there is no supranational power higher than the nation state. And that's, that has to be understood. If you don't understand that, you don't understand the Constitution of the United States. Mm-hmm. Nothing higher than the nation state. The nation states collectively will set the rules for international trade. Mm-hmm. Those are the rules. They will be enforced. If the empire doesn't like it, that's too bad. Mm-hmm. The whole purpose of setting up this thing is to break the power of the empire and to restore sanity. This is what the LaRouche plan does so well, because it covers all of these bases. Mm-hmm. You start off with Glass-Steagall, and as soon as you pass Glass-Steagall, the assertion of national sovereignty, you've changed the world. Yeah. You have all of these silly arguments that had Glass-Steagall had nothing to do with the crisis. If you want to argue about this in very narrow technical ways, there are some ways in which elements of that statement are true. But the statement itself is fundamentally a lie. Mm-hmm. Because in fact it is this continuing process of deregulation and the orgy of speculation which followed the repeal of Glass-Steagall, which created this giant bubble which is now blown up. And had we had regulation, it would not have been possible. And what FDR did was modern regulation, and that's what we have to go back to. We have to go back to the defense of the population, the defense of the nation state. We have to go back to the principles of physical economy. We have to build our way out of this. Mm-hmm. We have to do this not just by a few infrastructure projects, but by transforming our whole economy to a higher level of technology, of using the breakthroughs in universal principles that we've had, since the nuclear power was discovered. Mm-hmm. Have modern nuclear power, have magnetohydrodynamics, have NWAPA, have high-speed trains. Mm-hmm. All of this as a way of creating a new platform, as a basis for having a sound and efficient economy. That all of these things are not just in and of themselves good, but they define a new geometry of physical economy, which lifts everything up. Mm-hmm. You look at what we got as benefits out of the space program. We're still living off of that. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of idea that you go from manned flight to putting a man on the moon in just over 60 years. If you can keep up that rate of improvement, we'll be doing pretty good. But we gave that up.
I think everybody cites the $1 to $10 thing, but I think one of the more important aspects of that was the children wanting to grow up and be scientists and explore space, which I think is one of the reasons you have a lot of teachers being involved with fighting for the future right now, because that's one of the things that we start working on. NWAPA will change. Yeah, we'll get high-speed rail, maglev. We'll put engineers and scientists back to work manufacturing and these kinds of things. But I think one of the more important things is this idea of providing a future, something that's tangibly can be fought for and organized for. That you can see children who are growing up today, and you could actually look to a point in the future where you can see them being able to develop and do something useful in the world.
Yeah, that's the process we have to restart.
Yeah,
that our children grow up with the idea of pushing back the frontiers of science and making the planet a better place. Mm-hmm. that they actually have a sense of mission, and they see a way to do it, and then the fact it can be done, and that you set up an economy, a society which is based upon successive breakthroughs of universal physical principles and the implementation of those, and that it's this accelerating rate of development that makes your economy function and creates wealth. Yeah. It's not fixed assets. It's not milking every last dollar out of something before it dies. It's about this continuous transformation for the better. And that's the way out. That's what created the United States. When we functioned, that's how we functioned. Mm-hmm. We've abandoned that and we don't function anymore. And we better get back to it or we're going to collapse, as we see.
Yeah. As is happening right now.
Yeah. But that's the goal, to change the whole relationship of the people to science and progress. Mm-hmm. We don't have to sit back and watch everything die. Yeah. And as you can see with the number of people who are out in the streets, there are a lot of people who may not have quite the understanding of what needs to be done, but they're not prepared to just roll over and play dead while they're being destroyed.
Yeah.
And they're right. They shouldn't. But you gotta have the idea of where you need to go in mind, so that when the provocateurs come in and say, "Let's go kill somebody," you tell them, "Shut up." We're building civilization here. We're not destroying it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's a good place to end the discussion today. Stay tuned to this website, and that's all for now.